This picture looked innocent until a detective noticed the mailbox. It was July of 1997, the kind of Midwest afternoon that turned sidewalks into slow rivers of heat and made every backyard smell like cut grass and wet hose rubber. In Maple Glen, a cul-de-sac of pale ranch houses and chain-link fences, a sprinkler tick-tick-ticked a lazy halo across crabgrass, while a golden retriever named Daisy chased beads of water like they were fireflies come early. The Polaroid would catch all of that. A 7-year-old boy in a red t-shirt with the sleeves rolled high, hair slicked to his forehead, mouth open in a laugh that almost made sound on paper. Behind him, the sprinkler mist feathered the light into something soft. Down the fence line, a black mailbox stood on a pressure-treated post. Flag at half-mast the way tired fathers leave it when they forget. The boy's name was Evan Whitaker. His mother, Laura, held the Polaroid up with both hands as if steadying a kite in wind. "Hold still," she said, as Daisy bumped Evan's knees and the sprinkler swept back toward them. "Okay, now." The camera purred, thwacked, and spat a square that was grey as smoke. Laura shook it a little out of habit, laughing at herself as the image yawned awake. Evan mid-laugh. Daisy's paws blurred. The sprinkler mist caught in the sun. The mailbox, small and unimportant, just there because that is where mailboxes are. The picture would be pinned to the refrigerator for years. Neighbors would point to it. Officers would study it. One detective would hold it like a thing that might bruise if pressed too hard, but that came later. First was the summer day itself, and the small ordinary ways it cracked. Laura had taken the afternoon off from the dental office. She had promised Evan an hour with the sprinkler if he read 2 chapters out loud from the rocket book he'd bought at the library sale. He read in bursts, 5 paragraphs, then a question about Pluto, then a gulp of apple juice, then 5 more paragraphs, words tripping over missing front teeth. When the hour came, she pushed the picnic table a few feet, rolled the hose coil toward the middle of the yard and twisted the spigot. Daisy materialized from the porch like a wish granted. Across the street, Mr. and Mrs. Marlowe were arguing in small, contained voices that rose only when they forgot their windows were open. 2 houses down, Mrs. Kemp watered petunias and waved her nozzle at the sky when a plane passed. The world was so normal it almost felt scripted. Only the Whitaker mailbox didn't match the script. If you looked closely, not in the moment but later, when the photograph had time to tell on itself, you could see where the wet had shaded the side panel darker than the rest. You could see, too, the rim of the openable door shimmer different than the box around it, as if it had been closed only a breath ago. On the post, a thumbprint of mud the color of cocoa, and in the grass near the base, 2 crescent cuts from a heel pivoting fast. At 3:42 p.m. the phone rang inside. Laura left Evan with instructions. 2 laps around the sprinkler, then sit on the steps and count to 60. She jogged in, wiped her feet, and grabbed the receiver tucked between shoulder and ear. "Laura?" "It's Denise," said a voice that lived next door and knew every recycling day by heart. "Your mother called my house looking for you." "Landline crossed, I guess. She says call her right away. Something about a hospital billing mix-up." "I'm sure it's nothing." Laura rolled her eyes at the ceiling. "I swear if they charged her twice for x-rays again, thanks." "Niece, I'll call." She set the receiver down, scribbled a note on the pad by the phone, "Call Mom, hospital bill," and was halfway back to the porch when she glanced at the kitchen window over the sink. From there you could see the yard, the sprinkler, the dog doing a clumsy spin through the spray. You could also see the mailbox, small and black and suddenly absurdly open. Only it wasn't open. Not really. The angle lied. She blinked and the illusion snapped shut. The flag was down. The door was closed. Everything was fine. 60, Evan shouted, triumphant from the steps, legs puddling lakelets onto the wood. "Can I do the rocket jump?" "1 rocket jump," she called back, smiling. Then picture time, then towels. The rocket jump became 3. Daisy endorsed them all with a bark. When Laura lifted the Polaroid again, the world obeyed. Evan planted his feet, shoulders back, chin up as if a photographer at a Sears portrait studio had taught him confidence. The sprinkler drifted through the frame. The shutter winked. The square slid out like a secret being told. In the years that followed, adults would call that 2-minute span the window, the narrow seam of time in which whatever mattered most had happened, and none of them had seen it. The photograph would be their only map back to the moment. But that too was later. After the picture, Laura fetched towels and wrapped Evan like a burrito. She hung his t-shirt on the porch rail and put out a bowl of water for Daisy. "Inside," she said, "or your toes will grow mushrooms." Evan giggled, zombied into the kitchen, and left a wet signature across the linoleum. Laura checked the stove, switched off a burner she didn't remember turning on, and reached for the phone to call her mother. It was off the hook, cord looping on itself like a snake. She frowned, put it back and dialed. "Busy," she tried again. "Busy. Mom, can I show Daisy my rocket book?" Evan asked, dripping on the rug he'd been told not to drip on. He had Daisy's collar in one hand and the library paperback in the other, and both wore the ecstatic look of conspirators. 10 minutes, Laura said, then quiet time. They thumped down the hall toward Evan's room. In the hush that followed, Laura noticed something she couldn't place. A draft along her shin, maybe, or the memory of a shadow. It was the kind of feeling that makes you look over your shoulder in a perfectly empty room. On the counter, the Polaroid was blooming into clarity. In it, a small constellation of details was congealing. Evan's grin. Daisy's pause blurred by joy. The sprinkler mist like a veil. The mailbox with that almost open line that only existed because the light wanted it to. And under the mailbox, tucked into the shade at the base of the post, a smudge that might have been nothing and would later be everything. At 4:05 p.m., a white sedan rolled slow past the house. It did not stop. It would matter later that it did not stop. At 4:20 p.m., Laura went out to the curb with a sealed manila envelope addressed to Haven Creek Elementary Records Office. Immunization forms she should have mailed last week. She swung the mailbox door open, slipped the envelope inside and paused. Something snagged her thoughts. The faintest stickiness along the inner lip, the way the hinge felt damp under her fingers, as if someone else's hand had closed it not long before. She looked up and down the street. Nothing. Heat shimmered above the asphalt like a mirage no one had ordered. Back inside, Evan read to Daisy about Saturn's rings while Daisy pretended to understand. Laura dialed her mother again. This time it rang. This time her mother answered on the second ring. This time the hospital mix-up was the exact, boring thing she'd expected. 2 codes reversed. A clerk apologizing in a voice that said she meant it. When she hung up, the house felt normal enough to pass inspection. She made macaroni. She put the Polaroid on the fridge with the strawberry magnet Evan liked. She did not think about the mailbox again. Not until the next day, when everything that could be lost had learned how to leave, because the photograph would not stay private for long. 2 streets over, and 1 house down, something that did not belong to Maple Glen slipped out of a home and into a pocket, and then from that pocket into a glove compartment, where it would sweat and warp and wait. The thing had edges and weight and the slow gravity of proof. By dusk it was gone. By morning, Laura would stand on her porch listening to police radios, say her son's name as if he were a weather event. But on this day, the day of the sprinkler and the rocket jump and the fake argument between Daisy and a paperback, nothing terrible had happened yet. Not in the way people use that word. The terrible thing was still upstream, rounding a bend they could not see. When Detective Nora Quinn would eventually hold the Polaroid under a metal desk lamp in a windowless room, she would trace with her thumb the barely visible seam on the mailbox door, the crescent cuts near the post, the muddy thumbprint someone left because they were in a hurry. She would say out loud to no one, "It's not the boy, it's the box." And in that moment, days from now, but already woven into this one, she would understand what the picture had been trying to confess from the start. A photograph can lie about almost anything, except where the light goes. The next morning began with the sound of the front door opening. Just a small squeak, the kind every house makes when it stretches awake. Laura assumed it was the newspaper boy or the wind. She pulled the curtains open and found the yard washed, clean with dew, the sprinkler still lying on its side like an exhausted dancer. Daisy sat by the steps, ears perked toward the street, tail thumping slow. Evan's shoes were there too, one flipped upside down, the heel damp. She called his name once, twice. The hallway gave back only the echo of her own voice. His room was neat except for the bedspread, ruffled at the bottom corner like someone had left in a hurry. The library book sat open on the pillow, a dog ear at page 43. Daisy nosed it, whining. By the time the sun cleared the maples, the panic had already begun to flower. Neighbors fanned out in slippers, calling through fences. Mrs. Kemp said she'd seen Evan around 8, standing by the mailbox with a cereal bowl in his hand, waiting for the mail truck like he always did on Saturdays. But the mail truck never came that early. At 8:40, Laura called 911. Her voice was calm until she said his name. Then it broke in half. Detective Nora Quinn arrived from county headquarters 2 hours later. She was small, wiry, with a voice that made people stop talking. She listened while Laura repeated the story. Sprinkler, photo, dinner, bedtime, morning. Then Quinn asked for the Polaroid. Laura fetched it from the refrigerator, her fingers trembling against the magnet. Quinn held it up to the window light. This the same day. Yesterday afternoon, Laura said. Before everything, the detective studied the frame. Her eyes narrowed on the background, the faint line of the mailbox door, the smudge of mud beneath it. Mind if I look outside? They walked to the curb. The mailbox looked harmless again, just sun-bleached metal on an aging post. But Quinn crouched low, tracing a gloved finger along the edge. There were scratches near the hinge, tiny crescents of chipped paint. In the grass, a darker patch where the soil had been pressed down twice. Someone knelt here, she murmured. Maybe Evan, he likes bugs. Quinn shook her head. Too big, adult shoe print. And the flag. See that? It's clean on one side, dusty on the other. Someone moved it after dark. A deputy brought the mail stack from inside. Bills, a grocery flyer, a thick manila envelope torn along one edge. Inside, instead of forms or letters, was a small plastic dinosaur and a torn corner of a photograph. It was the Polaroid, but smaller, ripped, missing the boy's face. Laura stared at it as if it might rearrange itself back to whole. He loved that toy, she whispered. It was on his nightstand. Quinn turned the envelope over. No postage, no fingerprints that smudged visible. The flap's glue was damp as if it had been licked not long ago. By afternoon, the neighborhood was a quilt of uniforms and tape. Reporters began circling before evening. Laura gave her statement again and again until the words stopped sounding like words. The sun dropped. The sprinkler shadow stretched long across the yard. That night, after the last search party came in, Quinn sat on the Whitaker porch with a notebook on her knee. She kept the Polaroid in her lap, studying it under the porch light. There, just above the dog's wagging tail, was something she hadn't seen before, a sliver of gray cutting the air behind the fence, like a sleeve or maybe a shadow of someone standing too close. She asked Laura quietly, "Who lives behind you?" "The Marlowes. They've been there forever." "Why?" Quinn didn't answer. She just stared across the dark fence where a motion sensor light blinked on and off, the way lights do when something keeps moving just beyond their reach. Inside, Laura tried to sleep. Every few minutes she thought she heard the mailbox creak, a slow metal sigh. She told herself it was wind, but the wind wasn't supposed to whisper names. By the third day, the posters had gone up on every telephone pole between Maple Glen and the interstate. Evan's face, still laughing under the sprinkler, looked back from gas stations, diners and church doors. His red shirt had become a landmark. The golden retriever in the picture, a ghost of joy no one could bear to look at too long. Detective Nora Quinn hadn't slept. She kept a folding map of the neighborhood on the wall of the temporary command trailer. Colored pins marked houses already searched. Blue for clear, red for leads, yellow for ask again. There were too many yellows. At 6 a.m., she parked across from the Whitaker house and waited for the mail truck. It was the same route every morning, same driver, a man named Alvin Brock, 64, who'd been delivering mail there for decades. When he climbed out at the corner, Quinn approached. "Morning," she said, flashing her badge. "You worked this route yesterday?" Brock rubbed his eyes. "I did, but late. After lunch. Heat was killing me. Why? Did you notice anyone at the Whitaker's mailbox? Anyone waiting?" He frowned, thinking. There was a sedan parked a few houses down. Green, maybe. No plates on the front. Woman inside, I think, sunglasses. She looked lost. Quinn jotted it down. "You see her drop anything in the box?" "No, ma'am. I only remember the dog barking when I stopped." "Pretty thing, golden fur." After that, I was on to the next street. When he left, Quinn stood by the mailbox again. The morning light caught a faint line on the post. something carved shallow into the wood, only visible at a certain angle. It read 9:15, no initials, no words. Just the numbers dug in with something sharp. She called for the forensics tech, who photographed the marking, dusted it, and shook his head. Tool marks, maybe a key or a knife tip. Hard to date. Inside the house, Laura sat at the kitchen table, her face paper white. Daisy lay by the door, restless, ears twitching. The detective placed the Polaroid between them. "Look here," Quinn said, pointing at the blurry strip above the fence line. "We think someone was standing behind your yard." Laura squinted. "I thought that was the Marlowe's clothesline. That's what it looks like. But we measured yesterday. The fence is 6 feet. This line's higher than that." Someone taller was leaning over. Laura covered her mouth, eyes flooding. "You think they took him?" "I think someone watched long enough to know your routines. At noon, the Marlowes opened their back gate for inspection. Mr. Marlowe, retired electrician, polite, shaky hands, answered every question with, 'Of course, officer.' His wife wrung her dish towel as if she meant to strangle it. Quinn's eyes caught a black sedan under a tarp in their carport. "Mind if I look under there?" "It hasn't run in years," Mr. Marlowe said. "Go ahead." The tarp came off slow. Beneath it, the car was not dead. Its hood was warm, tires clean of dust. On the passenger seat lay a pair of damp footprints, small as a child's. Quinn straightened. "Who else drives this car?" "No one," he said too fast. "We've been home all week." "Then you won't mind coming down to the station." That evening, the town gathered at the church for a candlelight vigil. Laura stood near the altar, clutching Daisy's leash. Everyone prayed in the language of people who don't know what else to do. Outside, the rain came sudden, washing the chalk drawings from the sidewalk, stick figures, suns, the word "come home" written in childish scrawl. In the command trailer, Quinn replayed the security footage from the gas station 2 miles away. At exactly 9:15 p.m., the same time carved into the post, a green sedan passed the pump camera, headlights off. The passenger window was cracked open. In the blur of motion, the camera caught a child's arm, small and pale, resting against the glass. She froze the frame, zoomed in, and whispered to herself, "It's not about the boy. It's about what was in that mailbox." She turned the Polaroid over again, staring at the faint postal smudge on the back, 3 letters printed by chance from the manufacturing ink, DAR. She thought of the envelope, the toy dinosaur, the torn photo, the time carved into the post, Dar Dinosaur 9:15. Whatever it meant, it wasn't random. Someone had planted a message, and they wanted her to see it only after it was too late. The night after the vigil, Detective Nora Quinn sat in her unmarked car on the hill above Maple Glen. The rain had stopped, but the smell of wet asphalt still hung in the air. Down the street, porch lights blinked on one by one, small yellow prayers in the dark. She opened her file again. Evan Whitaker, age 7, missing. Last seen July 5th, 1997. Every report, every lead, every witness contradicted the next. But the pattern was there, thin as thread. The photograph. The mailbox. The carved time. The letters DAR she scribbled in her notebook. DAR, delivery access route. Then below it, or initials? DAR, Kurt David A. Marlowe. The thought burned. She looked out at the dark Marlowe house 2 lots down. No movement, just the pale hum of their porch light. She called for a surveillance team and leaned back, closing her eyes for the first time in 30 hours. At dawn, the call came from the county lab. The mud sample from the mailbox post matched the soil behind the Marlowe's garage. The footprint in the car was too small for an adult, but too large for Evan. By noon, the warrant was ready. Officers moved quietly through the yard, lifting floorboards, searching the crawl space, opening the car trunk that had been scrubbed with bleach. They found nothing until one of them pried open an old freezer in the garage corner. Inside, wrapped in plastic, was a stack of envelopes sealed and labeled with children's names. Most were old, smudged, water-damaged. Evan's name wasn't among them. When they questioned David Marlowe, he didn't fight. He just stared at the photograph Quinn laid on the table, the Polaroid she'd taken from Laura's refrigerator. "You were standing here," she said, pointing to the blurred figure behind the fence. Marlowe looked down, lips trembling. "You don't understand," he muttered. "He put it there." "Who did?" "The man who fixes the mailboxes. The one with the green car. He said it was a game." "What kind of game?" to see who would find the missing piece first. Quinn leaned forward. What piece? The picture. The rest of it. He said every kid had one. Before she could press further, Marlowe's wife began to cry, low, broken sobs that filled the interrogation room. They had no children of their own. David had been collecting the old Polaroids left in mailboxes around town, a ritual no one noticed. But now someone else was using it, leaving new photos, taking new children. 3 days later, a maintenance worker in a neighboring town found a plastic dinosaur wedged in a drain pipe near the post office. Inside the toy's hollow belly was a microfilm strip. The images were fragments of torn Polaroids, backs of heads, swings, fences, and in one frame, a boy in a red shirt and golden retriever blurred in motion. Evan. The strip was dated the same day he vanished. Quinn drove back to the Whitaker house that evening. Laura sat on the porch, Daisy at her feet, both looking smaller than they once had. You found something, Laura said quietly. We found pieces, Quinn answered. A trail someone left. But not him. Not yet, Laura nodded, eyes on the yard. He loved that yard. Said the sprinkler made rainbows. Quinn followed her gaze. The grass had grown taller. The mailbox stood straight and silent, its paint flaking where the word Whitaker once gleamed. She stepped closer, running a hand along the edge. Something caught her nail, a slit in the wood thin as a blade mark. Inside it, folded twice, was another photograph. It was the same Polaroid, but this one showed more. Behind Evan and Daisy, beyond the fence, a figure's shadow stretched long toward the mailbox. The outline wasn't Marlowe's. It was taller, thinner, wearing a cap. The green sedan's reflection glimmered faintly in the corner of the frame. On the back of the photo, written in uneven pencil, "Check the post." Sign of 15 again. Quinn looked at her watch. It was 9:12 p.m. She crossed the yard, flashlight steady. 3 minutes later, the beam caught something new. Another small plastic dinosaur half buried in the dirt, mud caked to its tail. She knelt, brushing it clean, and saw a sliver of paper taped to its belly. A message, faded but legible. "You're late again, detective. He's where the river bends." By sunrise, the county riverbank was lit by floodlights. They found a shallow dugout beneath the bend, a place hidden by reeds and stone. Inside were 2 sleeping bags, an empty cereal box, a flashlight with fading batteries, and in the mud near the entrance, a child's footprint beside the paw mark of a large dog. A mile downstream, searchers spotted Daisy, alive, muddy, tail wagging weakly. She led them back along the bank to a patch of driftwood. Underneath, curled in a tangle of blanket and leaves, was Evan. His face was pale, but his pulse fluttered steady under the detective's trembling fingers. When they carried him out, the sky was turning gold. He opened his eyes once, blinked, and whispered, "She told me to wait by the mailbox." "Who?" Quinn asked softly. "The lady with the green car. She said my mom sent her." He looked past the detective toward the hill where the houses began and smiled faintly, as if he could still see his backyard, his dog, and the sprinkler misting rainbows through the summer light. Weeks later, when the photo was returned to Laura, she pinned it back on the refrigerator. It looked exactly the same as before, the boy, the dog, the water, the mailbox, except now she could see what she hadn't before. The door slightly open, the flag halfway raised, the shadow in the corner, and each time she looked at it, she heard the echo of the detective's voice from that first night. This picture looked innocent until someone noticed the mailbox.